I just said yes to everything that was placed before me. And the work was really meaningful and really purposeful. And I poured so much of myself into it, and so much of my identity was tied to work that I was just repeating cycles of burnout kind of over and over again for a long time at the beginning of my career. And it actually ended up, when I started having to pay attention to it was when it started manifesting physically. And it's kind of unbelievable to even say this, but about 4 times a year, like once a quarter, after a big push towards an event or a big project was wrapping up, I got this like really intense, I have a lot of shoulder pain in general, but a really intense like neck and shoulder pain to the point where I couldn't turn my head from side to side. I had to literally be in bed.
Welcome, my fired up friends, to another episode of Leadership Beyond Burnout. Today's episode is going to be sponsored by Leadership and Resilience Consultants and the book, 5 Steps to End Financial Foolishness, How Unhealthy Relationships Impact Wealth. So whether this is your first time watching us or you're a return visitor, welcome, welcome, welcome. So let's get into our guest today. We have a very special guest, Miss Emily Pasnak-Lapchick. So she is the founder of Chrysalis Exchange. Now, this is a social enterprise cultivating accessible coaching and consulting services for people engaged in social change work. Her specialties include visioning work, navigating transitions, and burnout prevention. And her passion is supporting clients to tap into their inner desires and cultivate a life that they live on their terms. Emily supports organizations and entrepreneurs with strategic planning, program design, and facilitation. Previously, Emily spent a decade working in nonprofits, foundations, and academia, where she helped to launch and manage 9 programs. Without further ado, let's welcome Emily.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being a guest today. I am really thrilled to be able to share all of your vast experiences. I was being a little stalker on your website and saw the amount of world changing that you do with everywhere in the international speaking. And so I would love to hear what you feel you do to create a better place on this earth.
Thank you for all of that. And that's a big question. I think it's one I'm navigating frequently. And one of the things I always try to root myself in is that like we can't do everything alone, and we all have a role to play in change. So the way that contributing to social change has happened for me has looked different throughout my career. You know, earlier on, I was more involved directly with nonprofits and education awareness programs, kind of working with, like in community engagement. And now my work is really focused on supporting the folks who are engaged in social change and creating space for them to like reconnect with themselves, connect with their values, work to address burnout, which a lot of people engaged in nonprofit and social change work experience, and also to one of the things I'm very passionate about is supporting folks to break free of the expectations that are placed upon all of us. And a lot of them that really, keep us in a box that was never built for the majority of people, and understanding how those expectations from society and family and our upbringings impact and influence us, and that some of those serve us and lift us up, and others can hold us back. So navigating that and figuring out what's actually important to them, and then how they can use that to make an impact.
Oh, and that's such important work. And I don't know about those who have not engaged in international work, and especially nonprofits understand the passion that goes into those projects and that work, and the massive amount of need, especially when you see the devastation of international concerns. It can become quite consuming. Did you ever experience burnout in your work, or what have you seen in others that made you decide I need to shift my focus to helping them to be able to sustain this type of work?
Yeah, I'm laughing because yes, I've experienced burnout more times than I would like to admit or count. But it was something I didn't really recognize what it was for a long time. The first kind of iterations of it being really significant was earlier on in my career. And I felt really lucky to feel like I got my dream job straight out of college, and I loved the work that I did, and I was exposed to so many incredible opportunities, and I was so passionate and like eyes wide open. And I just said yes to everything that was placed before me. And the work was really meaningful and really purposeful. And I poured so much of myself into it, and so much of my identity was tied to work, that I was just repeating cycles of burnout kind of over and over again for a long time at the beginning of my career. And it actually ended up, when I started having to pay attention to it, was when it started manifesting physically. And it's kind of unbelievable to even say this, but about 4 times a year, like once a quarter, after a big push towards an event or a big project was wrapping up, I got this like really intense, I have a lot of shoulder pain in general, but a really intense like neck and shoulder pain, to the point where I couldn't turn my head from side to side. I had to literally be in bed with like heating pads and, all sorts of things for days. And when it was first happening, I did not recognize that that was a physical manifestation of burnout. But now, of course, I see how much that was impacting me, and how much not tending to myself and taking care of myself and putting the needs of like the programs that I was running and my team and everyone else first really was devastating, not just to me, but it impacted my work. You can't do, good, meaningful work when you're, in that case, physically immobilized, but also just drained and exhausted and burnt out all the time.
Absolutely. So if you weren't intentional, and if we aren't in general intentional about our rest and the types of rest that our body says, okay, I quit. I'm on strike. I'm not doing this anymore until you take care of me.
Yeah.
My physical and your emotional self, you need to heal that. So, and you touched on something that I think is so relevant in burnout cycles for a variety of industries, and that's when you're just entering that workforce and the career force. And I've seen two extremes of that. Either there are the Gen Zs who are very clear about their boundaries and won't hesitate to say it, or you have some others who are like, I just have to say yes to everything because I want them to know how much I love this job and how much I'm grateful, and I want to be here forever, and I want to make a difference.
Yep.
So those are the people that you are really, because nonprofits draw a lot of passionate projects.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. There's a lot of passionate people, and um, I think it is possible. Something I have clients ask me all the time is like, is it possible to care about my work and like have balance or still have a personal life, because they're so burnt out that they can't see another way because they've been just
Mhm.
operating that way for so long. So part of it is, figuring out, okay, what is it? First of all, balance is different for everyone, as in the
Mhm.
same way that passion and purpose is different for everyone. So figuring out what each individual needs to take care of themselves, and what type of balance works for them is also something that's, really important.
Right. And now, do you find that there's a certain type of client or personality that is drawn to you or who benefits most from your type of work and support or organization?
That's a great question. I definitely think that's like just the values alignment of wanting to make a difference, whatever that difference is, and however you see yourself operating. I think that's tends to be one of the draws. And then something I've noticed is, a lot of folks who come to me are initially coming because they want something to change,
Mm.
and they don't always know what that is. They just know like something's they can't keep operating the way that they are. A
It's not
lot of
sustainable.
It's not sustainable. A lot of times burnout is involved, and the cause of the burnout can vary greatly. Sometimes it's that they feel like they have to do everything at their job, or no one else can do the work that they do. Sometimes, and this has been happening, especially with a lot of my clients who are kind of in like mid-career, starting to really rise up into leadership positions, and are experiencing some pretty tough situations with their supervisors who are not always kind to them and really putting a ding in their confidence a lot. And that causes burnout too, because that's part of like the expectation setting. Sometimes one term I hear from a lot of the women leaders I worked with is like executive presence. And what are the connotations with executive presence? What does that mean? Who is the
Right.
model of executive presence? So when people are also made to fit into this box, like I'm making this motion instinctually because you feel constrained. I was talking to a client recently she just said, I had to put on a show every single day that I showed up. That's how I got through. And it's exhausting to do that. And so that is also something that can lead to burnout. It's like working through some of those things. And yeah, most of the people who come know that they want to change something to change. They might not know
Right.
exactly what that is. For some people, it's leaving their current work. For some people, it's figuring out what are the boundaries that I need. For others, it might be just spending more time in their personal life, like reconnecting with what gives them joy and purpose outside of work too. That's something that a lot of people have found a lot of great value and energizing too.
Would you, what would you give to clients as the number one burnout strategy that, and recognizing that it's definitely idealized, or maybe you want to share your number one strategy to prevent burnout for you?
So I'm giggling because when someone's burnt out, they don't want to hear this. But when you're burnt out, it's not just about taking a break. Like you have to restructure your life. So you have to look at what's happening. And, oftentimes career seems to be kind of like a symptom of it, but I think there's a false separation between career and personal life. It all blends together. It all influences each other. And if you're unsatisfied in one area, it's usually affecting another.
Mhm.
Um, so restructuring your life is about, taking stock of everything that's on your plate, which is going to be an exhausting exercise in and of itself.
Right.
And then looking through that and thinking about, what are the things that I enjoy doing? What are the things that I don't enjoy doing, but I I have to do because of my role, or just to, I don't want to do laundry, but I have to, I
Ugh,
have to do, there's things all of us don't want to do, right? But what are the things that you can like reduce or manage or structure differently so that it's not draining you all the time?
I love delegate.
And delegate. That was the next one I was going to say. Yeah. What can, we all have different strengths. So what can you give to other team members? What can you give to other family members, even friends? I think we underestimate the value of things that our friends would enjoy doing for us or coming and helping us do.
Right.
So that's part of it. And a more fun side to that is also I talk a lot about energy. So
Mhm.
everything that we do impacts our energy, and there's different things that influence our energy, like our environment, our social interactions, our spiritual life, whatever that means for you, physical, mental, emotional. So thinking about those things that influence you, what are the things that really energize you and kind of light you up and fill your cup? And then also, what are the things that drain you? And once you have those two lists, thinking about optimizing that. So on the list of what drains you, like just starting with one thing, what's one thing you can take off your list through delegation, or it's just not necessary. But then the exciting part is also making more room and space for one thing that energizes you. And when we're so exhausted and burnt out and drained, reconnecting with those things that like give us life and can sustain us and fill our cup and give us that energy again is so important to kind of get us through that period. Because burnout isn't fixed overnight. It's a long process. So
Right.
having some of those quick, accessible changes you can make a really big difference.
Right. And I'm curious whether you've experienced this with clients. So one of the things that I've seen is this grief of and loss of letting go of certain
Mm.
things and redefining who you are and no longer being that person. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I got multiple like rounds of chills as I was listening to you. I think it's something I definitely underestimated for a long time, and because I work with a lot of people going through various transitions, it's something I picked up on really quickly, that there was something that wasn't being named, and it was this grief.
Mhm.
I think at least in the United States, a lot of grief is associated with death. But we experience grief in many different facets when things change, whether we're whether we're like pursuing the change on our terms, or if the change is happening to us. It happens either way.
Right.
So making space to honor that grief, know that that's very real, um, and honor the person that you've been, that you are kind of leaving behind, or shedding different layers. My business is called Chrysalis Exchange, so I have the metaphor of a chrysalis and the transformation from caterpillar to butterfly. And there's parts of your past self you carry forward, and then parts that you shed. And it's definitely, to honor that grief is a really important part of that process.
Yes, and you had, as soon as you began explaining that process again, going from chrysalis to butterfly, it just made me think about the fact that as a chrysalis, it is really functional to be stagnant and stay in one place so that you can grow and develop and become what you need to become. However, if you become a butterfly and then choose to just stay where you are and walk from leaf to leaf, you're no longer being a butterfly. You are not in your potential. So that functional thing as a chrysalis is now a weight. It's dysfunctional in
Mm,
where you are in your life.
yeah, you've given me a whole new beautiful part of that metaphor to chew on and sit with. So thank you for that. It's really true.
Yes. Are you reading any books right now that really help to either further burnout recovery or maintaining passion and purpose for the people and organizations you work with, or just for general growth?
That's a great, I love this question. I actually used to ask when I used to hire people, one of the questions I would ask is what book has like impacted you the most or like changed your perspective? So I love that. I've been actually reading a lot of novels recently too,
Oh,
as kind of
wonderful.
like an outlet. And I think I really enjoy that for the experience of like activating our imagination and thinking about like what alternative worlds are possible. So I love that. I love that process. And then one of my favorite authors is Adrienne Marie Brown. So I've recently returned to her book Emergent Strategy. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
It's really powerful. I mean, all of her work is really powerful, and I think she's just one of the most wise people that we have the pleasure of coexisting with at one time. So Emergent Strategy is one. She also has another book that I kind of open up a lot, and it has an excellent piece on grief, actually, called Fables and Spells. And
Mm,
it's on all different, she's very rooted in social justice, but also very rooted in like rest and collective growth and community. So yeah, those are some of the kind of foundational ones that I come back to a lot.
okay, okay. And this is going to be a disruptive shift, but you sparked you sparked something in my brain as you were talking, and I'm thinking about the upcoming elections and the amount of possible shifts in funding and the culture within the United States that tended to bring out so much anxiety during the pandemic. And did you see that impact the people you serve as well? Or how might you decide to help them navigate this time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, definitely for the folks that I work with, for a number of reasons, election cycles are impactful. I mean, one for people in nonprofits, the amount of funding definitely shifts during election years. So not as much funding is going towards their work. So that has an impact on a more practical level. Um, and then, you know, depending on the issues that they might be advocating around, some of them are at the federal level, some of them are more at a local level. So that's something that they can be really attentive to. Um, and then on a personal level, for people who care about other people and care about, you know, social change, there are different outcomes that can occur. So I think, yeah, I think everyone has to navigate it in their own way, and depending on their proximity to that work. Like I have one client in particular I'm thinking of who works directly with the legislative cycle. So
Wow.
you know, she can't really distance herself from that work as much as some other clients who may be involved in other ways. Um, I think this is, you know, coming back to something I said at the beginning that I used to root myself is that like we as individuals, you know, we have a limited amount of like energy and capacity and attention. And we also have unique strengths that we can lend to the things that are important to us. And it can
Right.
be extremely easy to become overwhelmed because there's an endless number of things that are happening. It feels like the world has been on fire for years and years and years. And it's tough. Like sometimes it's tough to wake up every day and just move about your life with everything that is happening. It can feel really overwhelming. So trying to ground yourself in like where your power lies, where your influence lies, and using that to determine what impact you want to make. And I think one of the most important things is finding a community that you can lean on. So whether that doesn't have to be people that you even know, like some of my closest community are strangers I've found through, they're not strangers anymore, but people I've found through my work in different groups that I've joined or events that I've joined. And I've just felt a real strong connection with them, values wise, and the way that they were thinking about and processing what was happening in the world and the way they were kind of working on orienting themselves within that. So finding those communities that you can be with, to celebrate with, to advocate with, to grieve with, to organize with, to go through every aspect of that work is so important, because we're all part of this like network and fabric that contributes to the culture that we live in. So figuring out where to, what communities you want to be connected to and supporting in moments of change, like an election cycle, is really important.
Right. One of the things that really saddened me, I think, through and just the most recent cycles are most memorable for me, but it seemed as if when you were talking about developing your communities with similar values, so many people seem to be distancing themselves from close family members and friends, and I think it's very dangerous to try and make someone be everything that you are. Like,
Mm.
we can begin to preserve relationships and say, this relationship is really good for this aspect of my life. And maybe we don't discuss this, or maybe we don't have to all think alike. And it felt like, is it just me?
No. I think this is, you're pointing to something that's like a big, a lot of people have been grappling with, myself included, the last few years, because the, I, I'm thinking of this quote that someone said, which is like, we can be in disagreement and we can have different opinions, but not, my cousin just shared this recently, but not if your opinion is, I'm not going to quote this correctly, but like, if not if your opinion or view is causing me harm or like oppresses me in some way.
Agreed.
um
I
and
love
I,
that.
yeah, I think that's an important distinction, because yes, like one of the reasons we value diversity is because there's a diversity of thought and opinion and idea and perspective, and that is rich and supportive. And when someone is at risk of being harmed or someone is causing harm, there can be different boundaries that are created. And at the same, and with all of that said, I think one of the concepts that I'm personally really interested in, I think there's a really beautiful movement that's been happening in the US around restorative justice. And that, the idea is like around our criminal justice system and how restorative justice is an alternative to that. But a lot of the places it's been kind of rolling out and being tested is in schools. So when two students have something occur between them where harm was caused, they come together with their peers and they discuss the harm that was caused and they have a restorative justice. I know, go figure.
That's so radical. You talk to the person.
Yeah,
Oh my.
yeah. But I mean, imagine if like when you're kids and you're being raised, something like that is just normalized, that like
Mm-hmm.
when that happens, there's a safe space for you to talk about how that action impacted you, and also a safe space for another person to mess up, because like none of us are a perfect human. We all have different lenses, we all have different biases, we all see the world, in different ways as a result of the way that we were raised, or harms that were committed to us too.
Right.
And we act as a result of those. So, there's I think that's a beautiful example of like how relationships can be formed in a way where we don't even have to like each other, but we can respect each other,
Right.
honor each other, see one another's humanity, so that we can exist together in a community, even if we're not hanging out every day.
Right. It exists and not agree, but respect one another. I love that. So if you had to give my audience one charge to create significant change or impactful change, what would you suggest or how would you challenge them?
Oh, that's a big question.
I know, I'm sorry. Well, and let me pare that down a little bit because I
Okay.
missed one aspect. Significant change for themselves to
Mm,
prevent burnout and create a sense of renewal for them. What would you suggest? Is
okay.
that better?
Yes. Thank you.
That's what I meant. That's not what I said, but that's what I meant.
um, yeah, it's a good question. I want to think about that. Beyond what I've shared so far. Um, I think I think going back to the community piece, and this is actually an I don't know if it's a new thought, but a little bit. It's an emerging thought, let's say. Um, Thinking about your like care practices, healing practices, whatever you want to call them, thinking about those not in isolation, but in community.
Mm,
I think burnout is something that it's a systemic issue that we've individualized.
right.
Um, and at the end of the day, like there's lots of things you can do to restructure your life and take care of yourself. And if the systemic issues are not addressed, this we're in a recipe for burnout. That's the system that we live in. So I think that communal aspect, part of our system, is also creating that individualism, creating that isolation, creating the mentality that we have to do it alone. So part of challenging that system is also building that community and finding, if you are a person who is experiencing burnout, I can guarantee there is at a minimum one other person in your life who you're very close to who is also experiencing it.
Right.
And talking about that, being transparent about it, being vulnerable about it with another person, it's like the most immense relief you could imagine for yourself and for that other person, because you can see each other in that experience. You can talk about, what's contributing to it for each of you. You can talk about what strategies you're learning for yourself, because it's not one size fits all. I talk about like a pick and play. Like even for myself in care practices, I don't do one thing all the time. I have a list of things that I know feel supportive and nurturing to me, and I pick those based on how I'm feeling or what I'm attracted to that day. So sharing that, I had actually one of my friends last year, and this is why I was thinking about this. She wanted to like wake up and go on a walk in the morning every day.
Hmm.
And we were both talking about how we were tired and some of the things that we wanted to do. And hers was that walk. So she's like, can I just text you in the morning and say I've gone on my walk, or I'm finding it hard to go on my walk? And so we did that for a few weeks. And eventually she actually moved from me to her dad to be her basically accountability partner in that care practice. So I think something like that it's also a really nice way to like strengthen the relationship with one of your friends. I know a lot of people have friends who live in other places now and find it really hard to connect or like sustain those friendships. So something like that, as simple as that, has like multiple benefits. And that connection and community building is also really healing for anything that you're going through, whether it's burnout or grief or something else.
I just love, Emily, that your one challenge is so aligned with the work that you've done all your life. It's social and it's community based and it's collectivist. So I love that you are very ingrained in walking your talk and sharing that with others as a possible supportive solution.
Thank you. I appreciate you reflecting that back to me. It's definitely something I, try to be intentional about, but so it's nice to hear that it's coming across.
Yes. So, how can audience members follow your work, especially if they've been inspired by some of the things that you've shared, or they have a nonprofit and just want to get you in there?
Yeah, great question. So for whether it's for my coaching work or my consulting services, I call them co-creation services rather than consulting. But I have my website's probably the easiest way to reach me. So it's chrysalis-exchange.com. And through there, you can see some of the services I offer, but really what the best way to get to know it more is just to set up a free call. I offer complimentary calls just for us to get to know each other, understand what your goals are, understand if there's alignment with the work that I do. And I also have a big network of folks who offer other services as well. So if I can connect you with other people, if we're not a the match that you're looking for, if it's not what you're looking for at that moment, then we can do that. So yeah, I would love to have some connection calls and get to know you all and see how we might be able to support each other.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. And until next time. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'm Dr. Kimberly L. Wilson. This has been Leadership Beyond Burnout. Feel free to catch us every week, Thursdays, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific. And until next time, we will see